Most households are 3 days away from an empty table. 3 days of food, that's the average American pantry. Greek villages solved this problem centuries ago without freezers, without preservatives, and without spending more. Their answer still sits on shelves from Crete to the mountain north. 20 foods that last for years, some for decades, and one that archaeologists dug out of a volcano after 3,500 years, still recognizable. Millions of you found our first Greek pantry video. These are 20 completely different foods, no repeats, counted down from everyday useful to genuinely legendary. By number 1, you'll understand why Greek grandmothers never feared an empty cupboard. We uncover old world pantry wisdom like this every week, so subscribe now so you don't lose it. Let's open the pantry, dried oregano and wild thyme. Walk into any Greek village kitchen and look up. Hanging from the beams, bundles of oregano and thyme cut from hillsides in July and dried in the shade. Greek oregano, ragani, grows wild on sun-baked slopes. And Greeks insist the mountain kind is stronger than anything sold in a jar. Here's why it keeps. Once fully dried, a whole herb on the stem holds almost no moisture, and its aromatic oils are naturally antimicrobial. Kept whole and sealed away from light, it stays potent for years, far longer than the crushed powder in supermarket jars. The detail most people miss: never crumble the herb until the moment you use it. Crushing releases the oils, and the oils are the shelf life. Greek households store whole branches and rub the leaves off over the pot. In practice, this is the shelf that rescues every other shelf. A spoonful of dried ragani wakes up plain beans, boiled potatoes, or canned tomatoes. And when pantry cooking turns monotonous, dried herbs are the cheapest cure there is. That's flavor secured for years. But the next item on the shelf isn't for cooking at all. It's medicine in a paper bag. Mountain tea, sideritis. They call it tsai tauvunu, tea of the mountain. Sideritis grows above 3,000 feet, and shepherds have brewed it since antiquity for colds, stomach trouble, and long winters. Ancient writers knew the plant. Its name means "he who carries iron," said to heal wounds from iron weapons. Dried in bundles, stems, and flowers together, mountain tea holds for years in a paper bag or tin. No moisture, no oils that spoil. Just hard, dry stalks that wake up in boiling water. The overlooked part? Unlike black or green tea, sideritis has no caffeine to degrade and no delicate leaf to go stale. Old bundles brew almost as well as new ones, which is why village households cut enough each summer to last several winters. To use it, you break a few stalks into simmering water, steep, and sweeten with honey. In villages cut off by winter, this bag on the shelf was the pharmacy, the first thing brewed for a fever, a cough, or a cold night. Dried herbs keep the pantry healthy. The next food keeps it red. Summer, concentrated and sealed in jars. Sun-dried tomatoes. August in Greece produces more tomatoes than any family can eat, so Greeks do what Greeks have always done. They hand the surplus to the sun. Split, salted, and laid on screens, tomatoes shrink to leathery crescents, holding all their sugar and acid in concentrated form. Salt pulls the water out. The sun finishes the job. With the moisture gone, spoilage organisms have nothing to work with. Packed dry, they keep for a year or more. Submerged in olive oil, they turn silky and last many months sealed in the pantry. What most people miss? Dried tomatoes aren't a substitute for fresh. They're a different ingredient, deeper and almost meaty. Village cooks toss them into winter bean soups the way others use bacon, a flavor engine, not a garnish. 10 minutes in warm water brings them back to life. And here's the bonus. Don't pour that soaking water away. It's an instant broth, tomato flavor drawn back out, ready to start a soup or cook a pot of rice. Sun-dried tomatoes are summer preserved in pieces. The next food is summer preserved by the spoonful. Tomato paste in jars, pelt. Before the can, there was the rooftop. Greek families once spread crushed, salted tomato pulp on boards under the August sun, stirring for days until it darkened into a paste thick enough to hold a spoon upright. They called it pelt, and a few island households still make it this way. Reduction is preservation. Boiling or sun-thickening drives off water until sugars and acids are so concentrated that microbes can't grow. Sealed in sterilized jars under a film of olive oil, homemade paste keeps for a year or two in a cool cupboard. Unopened commercial jars last even longer. The overlooked trick: after every use, smooth the surface and recover it with a little oil. That thin golden seal keeps air off the paste, and air, not time, is what ruins it. One spoonful is the difference between surviving on storage food and actually eating well from it. Stirred into plain rice, lentils, or beans, tomato paste turns the dullest shelf staples into a meal that tastes cooked, not rationed. Tomatoes hold the sauce. The next item holds the meal itself: pasta that dries on bed sheets. Hylopites, sun-dried egg pasta. Every autumn in the Peloponnese, entire villages turn into pasta factories. Flour, eggs, and milk become sheets of dough cut into tiny squares called hylopites and spread on clean cloths to dry for days until they're hard as gravel. Drying is the whole secret. Fresh egg pasta spoils in days, but drop the moisture low enough, and even eggs and milk become shelf-stable. Properly dried and kept in cloth sacks or jars, hylopites last a year or more. Families deliberately make enough each autumn to reach the next one. Here's what's clever. The squares are cut small on purpose. More surface, faster and more even drying. No damp cores to spoil a whole sack. The shape is the preservation method. Cooking them is 15 minutes. Simmered in broth or in milk the old village way, finished with grated cheese. A handful from the sack, one pot, one flame. A hot supper on the shortest day of the year. Grain, egg, and patience. A winter of dinners in a pillowcase. But the next foods outlast pasta by decades, and they're the cheapest items on this entire list. Chickpeas, Revithia. Sailor's food, monastery food, island food. On Sifnos, chickpea soup, Revithata, bakes overnight in clay pots in the baker's dying oven, a Sunday tradition centuries old, and the raw material sits in sacks, effectively immortal. A dried chickpea is a seed in armor. Hard coat, almost no moisture, built by nature to wait. Kept dry and sealed, chickpeas remain safe to eat for 10, 20, even 30 years. They harden with age and ask for longer soaking, but they do not spoil. The detail most people miss. A pinch of baking soda in the soaking water softens even decade-old chickpeas by weakening their skins. Greek grandmothers knew this long before food scientists explained it. And Greeks don't stop at soup. Roasted chickpeas, Stragalia, are sold by the scoop as a snack that keeps for months in a jar, and ground chickpea flour stretches wheat when wheat runs low. One sack, 3 different foods. One legume down. The next one fed the poorest households in Greece for generations. And it cooks with no soaking at all. Black-eyed peas, Luvia. Before beans from the Americas reached Europe, Greeks already had Luvia. Black-eyed peas appear in ancient Greek texts. They're one of the old world's original survival foods, and on Cyprus and the islands, they're still boiled with greens and finished with olive oil and lemon. Like all dried pulses, they're seeds designed to endure. Sealed against moisture, they hold for a decade or more. But Luvia has a practical advantage the others don't. A thinner skin. No overnight soak, from sack to table in under an hour, which made it the workday food of farming families. The overlooked virtue, speed, matters in a crisis. When fuel is short, the pulse that cooks in 40 minutes beats the bean that needs 12 hours of preparation. Greek pantries keep both, and now you know why. The classic preparation says everything. Luvia simmered with whatever greens are on hand, fresh in summer, pickled in winter, finished with olive oil and lemon. 2 shelf foods and a squeeze of citrus, and the table is set. Fast food, the old way. The next lentil is so prized that Greek law protects its name, lentils of Eglouvi. High on the island of Lefkada, the village of Eglouvi grows what many Greeks call the country's finest lentil. Small, thin-skinned, planted and harvested by hand on mountain plateaus, celebrated every August with a festival where lentils are cooked in cauldrons for anyone who climbs up. Lentils are the oldest pulse humans ever farmed. Remains have been found in Greek caves from the Stone Age. Dried and sealed, they keep for a decade or more. And they cook faster than almost any stored protein. 25 minutes. No soaking. Here's the number that matters. Lentils deliver about a quarter of their weight in protein. Sack for sack, they store more usable protein than almost anything else a pantry can hold, which is why Greek fasting tables lean on lentil soup to this day. The national way to eat them is fakes. Thick lentil soup with bay leaf and garlic, finished with a splash of vinegar at the table. If you watched our first video, you know that vinegar is sitting on the same shelf, waiting for exactly this pot. Pulses are the pantry's engine room, but the next 2 items are its candy shelf. Dried fruit with imperial history. Dried figs of Kyme. On the island of Evia, the town of Kyme dries a fig so good it carries European protected status. Split by hand, sun-dried, then pressed flat in pairs, Kyme figs were ship cargo for centuries. Sweet, dense energy that crossed seas without spoiling. Sugar is the preservative. A dried fig is mostly concentrated fruit sugar, and high sugar binds water so tightly that mold and bacteria can't use it. Kept cool and sealed, dried figs hold for a year or more. Traditionally, they're packed with bay leaves, which deter insects naturally. The detail most people miss. White crystals on an old fig aren't mold. That's the sugar itself migrating to the surface. Villagers call figs, like that, the sweetest in the box. From the shelf, they work 2 ways. Eaten as they are for quick energy or chopped into hot wheat porridge to sweeten a winter breakfast. Field workers carried them in pockets, a day of labor fueled by a handful of dried fruit. Figs fed sailors. The next fruit funded a nation, Corinthian currants. For most of the 19th century, one dried fruit dominated Greece's entire export economy, the tiny black Corinthian currant. From vineyards around Corinth and the Ionian Islands, British and Dutch ships queued for it. Puddings across Europe depended on it, a dried grape carrying a young nation's finances. Like the fig, the currant survives on sugar concentration. Dried to a fraction of its weight, it keeps for a year or two in sealed jars, dark and dense as tiny raisins of pure sweetness. What's usually forgotten, currants were the pantry's sugar before sugar was affordable. Stirred into rice, wheat porridge, or stuffed vegetables, they sweetened savory food, a trick Greek cooking never abandoned and most of the world forgot. From the jar, they go straight into rice pilaf, stuffed peppers, or hot porridge, a spoonful of sweetness measured out through winter, in the years when a bag of sugar was a luxury and a jar of currants was not. The 200-day pantry. Now stop and notice something about this list. Beans, lentils, dried fruit, tomato paste, herbs, almost everything so far is plant-based. That's not an accident. It's the 200-day pantry. The Greek Orthodox calendar marks out roughly 200 fasting days a year, days without meat and often without dairy or oil. For centuries, every Greek household had to be able to eat well for weeks at a stretch from shelf-stable plant food alone. Fasting quietly engineered one of the most complete long-life pantries on Earth. Keep that in mind, because the rest of this countdown is where the animals, the sea, and the volcano come in, ouzo and sipuro. When the grape harvest ends, village stills come alive. Sipuro, distilled from pressed grape skins, has warmed Greek mountain communities since monks on Mount Athos recorded it centuries ago. Ouzo, its anise-flavored cousin, became the national spirit of the cafes. Here's the pantry fact. Distilled spirits never spoil. At 40% alcohol, nothing can live in the bottle. An unopened ouzo outlasts its owner. Even opened, it only slowly loses aroma, never safety. The overlooked role in the village pantry, spirits were never just for drinking. Sipuro was the antiseptic, the cough remedy, the trade good, and the preservative for fruit. A bottle on the shelf was stored value, liquid that could become medicine or money. And there's one more pantry use worth knowing. Fruit submerged into Sipuro keeps for a year or more, turning surplus cherries or figs into preserved fruit and flavored spirit at once. Instead of 2 shelf goods from one jar, spirits keep forever on their own. The next item needs help to last. And the help is a barrel of brine. Feta in barrel brine. Feta may be the most famous cheese in the world that's designed to live underwater. Made from sheep and goat milk and aged in brine, traditionally in beechwood barrels. Feta has been made in the Greek mountains for thousands of years. Cheese-making this old appears as far back as Homer. The brine is everything. Salt water starves spoilage bacteria, while letting the good cultures slowly deepen the flavor. Kept submerged, a piece of feta holds for many months. Barrel feta age the old way, often a year, with no refrigeration in a cool cellar. What most people get wrong, they pour the brine away. Do that and the cheese dries, sours, and dies in days. Keep every piece under the liquid. If you're ever short, dissolve salt in water and top it up. The brine isn't packaging, it's the preservation. From the barrel to the table takes nothing. A slab of feta, a rusk, a preserved tomato, a pour of olive oil. That's a complete Greek meal built entirely from this list and the last one. And the brine itself gets reused, starting the next batch. Soft cheese lives in liquid. Hard cheese wears armor, and that's next. Graviera and Kefalotiri, the hard cheeses. In Crete and the mountains, wheels of Graviera and Kefalotiri age in cool stone rooms, their rinds rubbed with salt or sealed in wax, sometimes even stored buried in olive oil. These are the long-distance cheeses, hard, salty, built to travel and to wait. Hard cheese keeps because it's already half preserved, most of the moisture pressed out, salt worked through. An aged rind sealing the interior. Waxed or oil-covered wheels hold for a year or more in a cellar. Even cut pieces last weeks. Historically, wheels crossed the Mediterranean as ship provisions, the forgotten trick. Hard mold on a hard cheese isn't the end. Villagers cut generously around it and keep eating. Something food safety agencies still confirm for hard cheeses today, though never for soft ones. In daily use, nothing is wasted. The wheel is grated over pasta and soups, over those hylopites from earlier in this list. And even the hard rind goes into the bean pot, simmered for flavor before it's fished out. The cheese feeds you twice. Cheese endures on land. The next food comes off the cliffs where the sea spray hits. A pickle most of the world has never tasted. Kritamo, pickled sea fennel. On the rock faces above Greek harbors grows a fleshy green plant that tastes of salt, lemon, and the sea. Kritamo, rock samphire. Island families climb for it in early summer, and its harvest is old enough that the plant appears in ancient herbal texts. Blanched and packed in vinegar brine, Kritamo keeps for a year or more sealed in jars. The plant arrives pre-adapted for preservation. It grows in salt spray, so its dense, briny flesh takes to pickling like nothing else. The overlooked economics. Critomo is free food from land nobody farms. In hard times, island households pickled jars of it as a vegetable that cost only labor and vinegar. On Cycladic tables today, it's a delicacy served beside fish. Poverty food promoted to pride. On the winter table, it does the job fresh salad can't. A sharp, briny green beside fish or beans when nothing grows outside. A jar opened in January tastes like the June cliff it came from. From the cliff to the jar. Now we go into the sea itself, for the fish that fed Greece through every Lent for 500 years. Salt cod, bakaliaros. Here's a Greek paradox. The fish most tied to Greek tradition doesn't swim in Greek waters. Salt cod, bakaliaros, arrives stiff as a board from the North Atlantic and has since Mediterranean traders discovered that cod buried in salt could cross any distance and wait in any pantry. Salt curing strips the fish of its water and makes it uninhabitable to bacteria. Kept dry and cool, salt cod holds for a year or more. Historically, it provisioned ships for entire voyages. Soaked in fresh water for a day or two, it returns to thick, white, flaking fish. The cultural detail? Because salted fish was permitted on certain fast days when fresh meat was not, bakaliaros with garlic sauce became the dish of Greek Annunciation Day. March 25th, Independence Day. A preserved import became a national tradition. The beloved preparation is fried bakaliaros with scordalia, garlic puree made from potatoes or bread, olive oil, and garlic. Notice what that plate is. A stored fish, stored potatoes, stored garlic, stored oil. A feast with nothing fresh in it. The sea, salted and stored. The next preservation method is richer, meat kept safe inside its own fat. Siglino, pork preserved in fat. In the stone towers of the Mani Peninsula, winter pig slaughter produced a food built to last until spring. Siglino. Pork is salted, smoked over sage and cypress, simmered, then packed into clay pots and completely submerged in its own rendered fat. The fat is the seal. Once it cools solid, air can't reach the meat, and without air, the smoked and salted pork keeps for months through the cold season. The Greek cousin of French confit, invented independently by mountain necessity. The overlooked genius. Nothing is wasted and nothing extra is bought. The animal preserves itself. Its fat is the container's lid. A household with one pig and one clay pot had protein until Easter, and it's used with discipline. A few slices of siglino flavor an entire pot of beans or greens, and the preserving fat itself becomes the cooking fat for eggs and potatoes. One clay pot seasons a season of meals. Meat sealed in fat. The next preservation is sweeter, whole fruit suspended in syrup made to be offered to guests one spoonful at a time. Spoon sweets, glikata koutalio. In Greece, hospitality has an official food, the spoon sweet. Whole small fruits, sour cherries, quince, bitter orange peel, even tiny unripe walnuts, simmered in heavy syrup and sealed in jars, served to visitors on a single spoon with cold water. Sugar at this concentration is a preservative as ruthless as salt. It binds the water, and nothing can grow. Properly made and sealed, spoon sweets keep for years in the cupboard, which is exactly the point. A household could always honor a guest, in any season, from a shelf. The detail most people miss. Spoon sweets were how fruit that couldn't be stored fresh got stored anyway. The bitter, the sour, the unripe. Sugar redeemed all of it. Nothing from the tree was lost. They earned their shelf space twice over. The fruit goes on to yogurt or bread, and the syrup stirs into cold water for a cordial. In lean years, a jar of spoon sweets was also social currency, the gift a household could always afford to give. Sweetness for guests. The next food was for emperors. Fish roe sealed in beeswax, one of the oldest luxury preserved foods on earth. Avgotaracho, roe sealed in beeswax. From the lagoons of Messalongi comes something that looks like an amber candle. Avgotaracho, gray mullet roe, salted, pressed, air-dried, then dipped whole into molten beeswax. Byzantine records praise it. It carries protected status today, and it may be the most elegant preservation method on this list. The wax does what tin cans do, a total seal against air and moisture, but it was doing it 1,000 years before canning existed. Inside its wax shell, the salted roe keeps for many months, its flavor deepening into something between the sea and aged cheese. The overlooked lesson? Preservation and luxury aren't opposites. The same technique that kept fishing families fed made a product emperors paid for. Shave it thin over pasta, and you're tasting Byzantium. It's used the way all concentrated foods are, sparingly. The wax peels back just before serving, and thin amber shavings over pasta, eggs, or bread carry more flavor than the portion size suggests. One piece marks a whole season of occasions. Wax-sealed gold from a lagoon. 2 items left, and the next one has fed Greece since the Bronze Age granaries. Whole wheat and barley grain. Before every other food on this list, there was grain in a clay jar. Whole wheat and barley, intact, unmilled, filled the storerooms of Mycenaean palaces and fed the mysteries of Demeter at Eleusis. Greek civilization was, at bottom, stored grain. An intact kernel is a sealed vault. The bran protects the germ, and with no cracks for air or moisture, whole grain kept dry and sealed can remain sound for decades. Flour goes stale in months, but the unbroken kernel endures. That's why villages milled little and often, grinding only what the weak needed. The principle worth stealing: store the whole, process at the last moment. It's the same rule as the oregano at number 20, and it's the closest thing this list has to a universal law. Stored grain also gave Greek kitchens their oldest hot meals: kernels boiled whole and dressed with oil, or cracked by hand mill into porridge. The mill mattered as much as the grain. Flour made fresh in exactly the amount the day needed, which brings us to number 1. And number 1 survived something no pantry was ever built for: a volcano. Santorini Fava. Around 1600 BCE, the volcano of Thera erupted and buried the town of Akrotiri on Santorini under ash. When archaeologists opened its storerooms 3,500 years later, they found the storage jars still in place. And inside some of them, the remains of pulses the islanders had put away for the winter that never came. Food still identifiable after 36 centuries in the dark. The descendants of those crops still grow in the same volcanic soil. Santorini Fava, yellow split peas protected by European law, thrives in the island's ash fields, and dried fava keeps the way all great pulses do, sealed and dry a decade or more without complaint. Cooked, it becomes the island's signature dish, a golden puree under olive oil, lemon, and onions. But that's not why it's number 1. It's number 1 because it's the entire philosophy of the Greek pantry proven by catastrophe. The people of Akrotiri didn't know what was coming. Their food was ready anyway. That's what a real pantry is. Not fear, readiness. 20 more foods and one thread through all of them. Herbs stored whole, seeds kept sealed, water driven out by sun, salt, sugar, smoke, or fat, air locked away by oil, brine, or beeswax. The Greeks didn't have one preservation trick. They had a system refined over 3,000 years and 200 fasting days a year, and every jar of it still works in a modern kitchen. Build from the bottom of this list up. Herbs and tomatoes first, then the pulses. They're the cheapest insurance on earth. Then the preserved proteins as you go. If you missed our first 20 Greek pantry foods, that video is on screen now. Completely different list, same tradition, and subscribe if you haven't. Old world pantry wisdom every single week. The best time to build a pantry is before you need one.